After months of build-up, Copenhagen has arrived. And not just in the form of lots of politicians trying to thrash out a deal, many of you are also taking up the issues online. Syed in France has emailed, "I feel guilty for my consumption. If we buy just what we really need, factories will produce less and emissions will fall." You can probably see on the screen there the latest feeds live from Copenhagen. Gus has got in touch with BBC News from Colombia. No government is going to stifle their economy with expensive green solutions. Jessica in New Jersey's a bit more optimistic. "I think this meeting is the most important of its kind, and I'm hopeful that big polluter nations finally will set significant targets." Well, wherever you're watching, do you feel that same sense of urgency that Jessica's talking about? And do you believe that our leaders are capable of taking the right action? We've guests in Nairobi, Delhi, Berlin and Copenhagen to start us off. And wherever you are, you're very welcome to get involved too. Call us on country code 44 20 70 83 72 72. You can text us from your mobile phone on country code 44 7786 20 60 80, or you can email us at worldhaveyoursay@bbc.com, or add a comment on the blog at worldhaveyoursay.com. Well, here in the studio for the whole programme is Anna Chen, who's a blogger and writer. Nice to see you, Anna. Some people might know you better as Madam Meow, which is your blogging name. Either way, you're very welcome onto the programme. And we've guests in 3 cities joining us. Prabir Purkayastha is an energy analyst in Delhi. Isaac Muara is in Nairobi. We're going to speak to him a little bit later in the programme. Meg Boyle is an American climate change activist in Copenhagen. And last but not least, Daniel Mittler is an environmentalist and blogger in Berlin. You're all very welcome to the programme. We've also got lots of messages coming in online, and we'll come to those in a little bit. But let me start with Meg in Copenhagen. Meg, why have you travelled all the way from the US to Denmark to this climate summit? Why do you think it's so important?
Well, thank you for having me. I think it's not only a question of why I've come here, but why the thousands upon thousands of people who are around me right now as I'm speaking to you have come here as well. You know, I talked to a friend a few minutes ago who said registration lines are still 3 hours long. There are thousands of people streaming in to join the thousands already here. And the atmosphere here is very, very high energy, which frankly is very encouraging. A lot of that feels to me much like life in the United States did last year, right before the presidential election, when there was a sort of surreal experience of a moment that had been long worked for and much awaited come to pass, and this sort of nervous energy over whether it would deliver on all of its promises. And I think that's the energy that we're feeling here today. A lot of that anticipation, of course, has to do with that same man and President Barack Obama and what his presence here at the end of next week, as well as the other ministers and heads of state, will mean. So
you've every faith that there is good reason to be optimistic. Prabir in Delhi, do you share that optimism?
Well, I wish that optimism is justified, and I do hope that the US, which is really the leading polluter today, the largest per capita emissions today, will ante up. But unfortunately, our experience the last time on Kyoto Protocol wasn't good, and we seem to be rather following the US domestic legislation rather than taking international action.
Meg, do you think that's a fair comment, that actually Barack Obama's more concerned with domestic politics, well, as he should be, as some people would say, rather than the bigger picture?
There's a real concern particularly among developing country delegates here, as well as among members of civil society, that what could come out of these talks is a political agreement, and only that. A photo opportunity with no real intention to deliver later, or here in Copenhagen, on a legally binding agreement. We're here because we believe that a fair, ambitious, and binding agreement can still come out of these talks. It will require a new kind of leadership, but we are not in Kyoto anymore. This is not 1997, and there are a few key differences about the circumstances surrounding these negotiations, which mean that anything and everything is still possible here.
Let me read you this message from Matt in Amsterdam, who says, "The summit will not make a difference as it comes down to money and greed. Pollution is driven by industrialization, which is driven by Western consumers' demand for low-cost goods. Until this is discussed and fixed with the money men of the world, the summit is completely pointless." Anna, is that fair?
I completely agree with that. If you have a society, a world that's producing for greed, not need, it doesn't matter what they agree at Copenhagen, because this is what's going to be driving the world's production. And I actually fear that this may be too little too late anyway, because we're supposed to be peaking in 2016 in order to have any hope, even a 50-50 chance of keeping the temperatures down to the 2% rise. And I think it's going to go way beyond that.
Let's bring in Daniel in Berlin, who we haven't heard from yet. Daniel, does the whole system have to change rather than just the same system making different commitments on its carbon emissions?
The system definitely has to change. If we're talking about the political system, what has to end is hypocrisy. If somebody like Chancellor Merkel from Berlin is traveling to Copenhagen and pretending to be the savior of the climate, that's laughable given the fact that it's the very same Chancellor that is pushing for new coal-fired power plants, the worst way to produce energy if you're concerned about the climate. And it's the same Chancellor who's prevented Germany from making a credible offer to developing countries on providing finance for the green revolution we need, the energy revolution we need. So what we do have to change is the political hypocrisy, and the next 2 weeks are a real test for the political system.
Well, you're talking about a change in the way that we all consume energy. Nikolai's just posted from Brussels, climate change or not, there needs to be a change in the way that nations work. We can't be dependent on other countries for irreplaceable energy like gas and petrol. And Misha's also got in touch from New York. If this is a crisis that requires immediate dramatic change, then it's our lifestyles that have to alter. I wonder if you're watching this and watching all the coverage of Copenhagen and thinking, actually, this is as much about me changing how I behave as it is about my country changing. You're welcome to post on the blog. It's worldhaveyoursay.com. And Sheetal from the World Have Your Say team is watching all of your messages as they come in.
Bob in Canada says the best outcome would include the creation of a large international fund where all nations contribute according to their wealth. Then we would begin to see real progress. Camelia in Strasbourg writes, there may be no causal link between climate change and our way of life, but pollution is a reality which may affect us in a different way. Therefore, I believe something needs to be done. And Shivanka in Kolkata says the truth is most of the stuff consumed by the West originates from the tropics, be it sugar or fruit. Even Western farmers are feeling the pinch of climate change. Remember, you can get involved too. Go to the blog, worldhaveyoursay.com.
Thank you very much indeed, Sheetal. There's another email here which I'd like to put to all of you. Morgan in Philadelphia says, I hope that any goals that come out of this summit are realistic and focus on the changes that can be implemented. Giving the world a laundry list that demands everyone change how they live isn't likely to work. Meg, what would you say to Morgan if he's watching now? Is there a danger that you build this up, but actually what's taken on board won't be implemented?
I'd say that what comes out of these talks is as decided right now by what's going on at home as what's going on here. One of the unique features of Copenhagen is the unprecedented press attention that's been paid to these meetings as compared to meetings past around the world. So the eyes of the world are quite literally on Copenhagen. I work with a group, whatwedo.org, that's highlighting citizen action and groundbreaking action on the toughest problems we face. I know there are many representatives here of civil society as well that are highlighting the real leadership that's happening on the ground around the world, and that these leaders need to fall in line with, quite frankly, here next week.
Let's talk about this further. Prabir and Delhi, come in on this. Gordon Brown's talking about there must be a binding agreement come the Bonn meeting in June. Do you actually believe that these countries are capable of not just agreeing something, but more importantly, sticking to it?